Hi, and welcome back to my channel. We had our son a few weeks ago now, so I'm a first-time mom. I recorded our labor and delivery process and posted that on my TikTok, but I wanted to be able to have another forum where I could actually talk through everything that kind of happened now that it's been a few weeks since he was born, and be able to re-go over everything, because I thought it was helpful to be able to hear some other people's birth stories and what happened to them during their labor and delivery process. So if my story can help someone else who may go through something similar to know that they're not alone and this is how my experience was with it, I think that could be very helpful. So that's my goal, and that's what I'm gonna do today, is just talk through the entire process. I know some people make very detailed birth plans. I would say I had a very loose birth plan, and that kind of helped with different things that actually ended up happening that day. I knew my main things were I wanted to have a healthy baby boy, and then I wanted an epidural. Those are really the main things on my quote-unquote birth plan, I would say. So I was open to whatever other potential procedures would need to be done for that to happen, because again, that was the most important thing for me, was healthy baby boy. So whatever we need to do to get there, we'll do it. So again, I'm gonna walk through everything, but first and foremost, before I get into it, I do wanna say thank you again to all of the doctors and nurses and staff that we experienced during our time for labor delivery, because we were there at the hospital for a while and we have nothing but great things to say about everyone. I even nominated a couple of the nurses that worked with us for the Daisy Award because we just had such great experiences. They really just helped me feel comfortable, and throughout every new thing that was happening, they would talk me through it really well. So I really just want to say thank you again to everyone that was involved in that, because I think having a great team by your side when you're going through labor and delivery is really, really important. So getting into it now, my OB office, there are a few different OBs in there, so you kind of rotate through to make sure you meet everyone, because you never know who's gonna actually deliver your baby. So we had talked about induction, ultimately decided that would be the best route, so we scheduled our induction. We went in that day for it. We went in late that night, about 11 p.m. that first night. We got there, we checked in, the nurse brought us to our room. We started going over everything. She's hooking me up to the monitors, so she's getting a blood pressure cuff on me, and then also putting on, when you're in labor, they want to monitor the baby's heart rate and then also your contractions, so they're strapping something around your stomach for that. So she gets me all hooked up for that. We kind of talk over the potential medicines that are going to be used with the induction, kind of walking me through everything before the OB comes in, basically. And we knew that, like I said, obviously I knew I was being induced. So the method my OB wanted to start with, which I had already talked through my OB with this at my last regular appointment at the office that I went to, we talked about using Cytotec, which they'll place, and then you basically wait for about 4 hours, and the goal of it is to soften your cervix. So a lot of times multiple rounds have to be done. It just depends on how your body responds to everything. So we talked about that and how it has to sit for about an hour after it's placed so that it can really kind of have the full effect. So she's like, if you need to use the restroom, now's a good time to do that before the OB comes in. I'm like, perfect. So we get me unhooked from everything. I go to the restroom. I come back. She's strapping me back in. And as she's getting the monitors back around my stomach that are monitoring, again, the baby's heart rate, you could just tell the energy in the room shifted a little bit. And I didn't really know what was happening in that moment, because I'm just kind of getting settled with her strapping me back in. It's my first time getting everything back on. And then the next thing you know, there are literally, I think, maybe 8 other people in the room. So the nurse had they wear like basically call buttons on their uniforms in case of emergency. So there's all these people coming in, and in the process of all this, she had already told me, can you flip to your right side for me? Can you flip to your left side? And then she had me go on all fours. So I'm on all fours now with my back facing everyone, but I'm kind of looking around so I can see there's all these new people now in the room with us, and I'm instantly like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm feeling a little panicked. Travis is kind of looking like, what's going on too? Someone immediately comes up on my side. They introduced themselves. They said, hey, I think it was a nurse. I can't remember if it was a nurse or a resident that was talking to me at that moment. But they introduced themselves to me. They said, your baby's heart rate took a little bit of a dip. It's coming back up now. But that's why all these people you haven't met yet are in here. Everything's okay now, though. And just made me feel really comfortable, which I was really appreciative of, because it literally went from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds, and we didn't know in that moment what was happening. So I really appreciated that. I'm an orthodontist, and with my patients, I try to do the same. I try to explain things in a way where they're comfortable with them. And obviously with labor and delivery, you're dealing with a whole nother beast. You're dealing with bringing a human into this world. So it's something like dealing with teeth. So I could tell something very serious was happening. So it was nice to have someone there who was actually able to explain it to us, go over everything. And again, they just did such a great job of keeping myself and my husband very calm. So I really appreciated that. But so we had that scare right away. That was within 20 minutes of us being in our room, because she got me all hooked up. I went to the restroom, and then as soon as I came back, we went through that. And so I think we were both a little shaken up after that for a little bit, just because it was not something we were expecting, obviously, so we didn't really know what to think. But the OB did come in after that, kind of went over everything again, assured us everything was okay now. They figured it might have been something with the baby's position. There could be a lot of different reasons why your baby's heart rate is dropping when you're in this process. So we made sure everything was stable first, and then we went ahead with that first round of Cytotec, which the goal was to soften your cervix, like I said. So we got that in, and then it was basically a waiting game from that point. She told us to try and get some rest, because we would check back in that 4-hour point and then see what was happening from there. So throughout my whole labor and delivery process, there were multiple times that heart rate issue happened with the baby, and it was typically after I went to the restroom. So I waited for that hour again to let that Cytotec set in. I'd gone to the restroom, and the same issue happened when I came back in. The nurse is kind of guiding me through it all. We kind of know what positions I need to get in to get the baby's heart rate back up. But we dealt with that several times throughout our whole labor process. And I ended up being in labor for, I think it was almost 48 hours. So it was a long time. Not active labor, obviously. Active labor is only considered, I believe, when you're so many centimeters dilated. But still, it was a long time to be dealing with that. So it was just something I had to keep myself calm. My husband does a great job of always keeping me calm. He's a calm person. So he was kind of just putting that energy on me too, which I was really appreciative of. Because like I said, it's just, you get scared no matter what. Even if the heart rate's stable again, you're starting to think, is everything okay? Is my baby okay? So you start to worry, but everything was fine. But just know that did happen several times throughout my laboring process. So we did a few rounds of the Cytotec, again, with those 4-hour intervals in between. So we're placing it, waiting, checking. I'm not dilated at all. I don't think I said that. When I got to the hospital, I was not dilated at all. And then with the first couple of rounds, I wasn't making any progress. At this point, there's been shift changes. There's a new OB on call. There's a new nurse we're dealing with. Just everything shifts because you're in the hospital and they have to go home and live their lives too. So we're with new providers. Again, someone I've met before though. So it's not like I was dealing with a different OB. It's someone I knew. I believe so with the first OB actually, before it did change, we mentioned Foley balloon, which is another method you can use during an induction to help actually dilate your cervix, since I wasn't really dilating at all. The cervix was softening, but I wasn't dilating yet. And I also forgot to mention, I'm jumping all over the place. My water did break that next morning after we were there. So we got there that first night. My water ended up breaking during day 2 at some point. So then also during day 2 later in the day, because my water did break, we're starting to think, okay, we need to get this process moving. So that's when Foley balloons were mentioned. So she talked me through how that would work. I was okay. Again, the goal was healthy baby boy. So whatever we need to do to get him out of here safely, we'll try it. So we decided to move forward with that. She placed the Foley balloon. I think it actually ended up being a couple different balloons, and it was a different method than the actual Foley, but same idea as that. They insert it and then inflate it with the goal to actually dilate the cervix. So we placed those, and it was a lot of pressure. That's the best way I can describe it, because at this point, I don't have any pain medication because I was having contractions, but they weren't painful enough, in my opinion, yet to where I wanted to have an epidural or anything yet. But again, remember, that was part of my birth plan. I knew I wanted an epidural. It was just how long I could kind of handle the contractions before I actually was like, okay, it's time for me to go ahead and get that epidural. So placed the balloons, and at first I thought I could push through. It was okay because it was a lot of pressure, but ultimately decided, okay, I think it's time for the epidural because the pressure was getting to be a little bit more than I could handle. So they called the anesthesiologist in, placed the epidural. I know there's a lot of scary things out there about epidural. Everyone's gonna have a different experience, obviously. I think for me, because the pressure I was feeling from the Foley balloon was so great that the epidural did not bother me at all. But again, if I had gotten the epidural maybe when things weren't as bad, or I was having contractions, but they weren't so severe, or whatever the case may be, it could have been a different experience. So you're gonna have your own experience with everything that you do during your labor process. So remember that. But in my opinion, the epidural was fine because I wanted anything to get that pressure to go away. And it did immediately. It was I felt a lot better after I had the epidural. That pressure just felt, I had instant relief with it. So I was grateful for that. So then after that, same deal, we're checking progress. So we're checking to see how much more I've dilated with those Foley balloons in, because the goal with those, as she explained it to me, was you want your cervix to dilate and those balloons fall out on their own because you've dilated it enough for them to basically, it's loose enough in there to where they fall out. So like I mentioned before, that heart rate issue when I would get into a different position or go to the restroom and come back was something that happened all throughout the labor process. So after the Foley balloons were inserted, that ended up happening again. It was the same thing. We had someone else that was treating us at that point, and with the heart rate dropping, I think it dropped a little bit lower than it had any other time. So they got me on all fours again. My back's facing everyone. There's multiple people in the room, at least 6 or 7 at this point, and they end up taking the balloons out at that moment to basically make sure everything was okay with the baby. So they checked to see how dilated I had gotten at that point after taking those out, and I ended up being about 5 or 5.5 centimeters dilated. So I made some progress, but still not where we need to be to push, because the goal is 10 centimeters to be able to push. We started talking through options of what else we could really do, and then again making sure that's after the baby was stable, because that was my whole thing. I'm like, is everything still okay with the baby? Do we need to go a different direction in order to make sure he's still going to be healthy? But we kind of were still on the same track with everything, but wanting to get things moving as fast as possible. So that's when Pitocin was introduced, and that's something that hooks up to your IV, and it's more for increasing contractions, because you want your contractions to be so close together in order to actually be ready to push. And again, you need to dilate a little bit more. So the goal is that those are going to help those things. Now, I'm probably not explaining that perfectly, but that's how it's explained to me. So that was the goal with the Pitocin. So we got that going after we made sure baby was stable, and that was really our next step to be able to get me to dilate. We kept checking on that. That was increased throughout the time too, because there's different levels that can be placed at. So we started low and then kept increasing. And the whole goal was that once I was dilated enough, we could start pushing. So that ended up lasting for a while. I was on the Pitocin for a long time. So now we're into the next day with that. And so we start talking through options again. And then we checked on my dilation later that day. Again, I had the heart rate issue a few times that day, so knew what to expect with that. And I finally dilated a little bit more. I think at one check I was at 7 or 7.5. So I was making progress. So that was good news. We kept increasing the Pitocin as recommended. And then we worked our way to where my last check with that OB, I was at a 9. So again, we're getting somewhere. So she was happy with that, hoping that I'd be at a 10 very soon. And then I switched to different OB. We thought we had met all the OBs, but apparently not. So there was one OB we hadn't met yet, and she ended up being amazing. I knew instantly when she came in, she had really good rapport. I really liked her. So I knew it would be a good situation. It was just crazy that we ended up with someone we hadn't met for the actual delivery, but she walked me through everything. We talked through what had been happening. She's kind of going over, I heard this was happening to baby's heart rate. Our goal, just like your goal, is to get a healthy baby. So this is what we're going to do now. Because she checked me again, and I was finally at a 10, I believe, at that point. And so we started talking through how it was going to work with me pushing and everything, and how we would continue to monitor the baby's heart rate. And if we needed to, these were our other options, which was very helpful to have discussed again right then and there, because you never know what's really going to happen once you start pushing, right? You hope that everything goes well. But she started telling me, hey, we may have to intervene with this, we may have to do this or that, and then worst case scenario, if things aren't going the way that we want, then we'll start discussing a C-section. I want to mention it now so that you've heard it before and it's not a total shock if we have to go that route. And again, for me, since I wanted a healthy baby, I was okay if that's where we ended up. Obviously, if I could do a vaginal delivery, I was preferring that. But if that's not what we needed to do or was going to be the best route, then I was okay with that switching. So it was just a matter of whatever my providers were recommending. But again, it was good to hear right then before I even started pushing, because I knew in the back of my mind it was a possibility, just with everything that had been happening with the heart rate. So keeping that in mind, I think helped me a lot. So we got everything situated. I started pushing. We went through a few rounds of that, and with pushing each time, baby's heart rate was dropping. So we would kind of reposition me, and we determined like some contractions that they wouldn't even have me push to let the heart rate actually stabilize again. So we kind of kept that route for a little bit, kept monitoring baby's heart rate, monitoring me as well to make sure I'm, still doing okay with everything. Travis is right there next to me the entire time, kind of holding my hand through everything. And we did a few rounds of that, pushing, monitoring the heart rate, kept dropping, repositioning me, same thing. We kept cycling through that. And the OB is talking to me through the entire time. She's like, okay, Ariel, this is how we're looking. I think we give this a couple more tries, but if baby's heart rate continues to drop this way, we might be going that C-section route that I've already mentioned. And at that point, I did get a little, got emotional at that point because, again, we showed up at 11 p.m. on that first day, and then now this is 2 whole days later. So I believe I started pushing around 7, I want to say. So if 11 p.m. that day would have been 48 hours of labor, not active labor, but being in labor, starting the process of the induction. So I think for me, I got emotional at that point because my immediate thought was, wow, we've been here so long and we've done all of these things to try and have this baby be delivered vaginally, and it's just not working. So I think my emotions were obviously valid in that moment, but there were definitely tears shed just from frustration more than anything, which I think everyone understood. But in that moment, I felt silly for crying, and looking back, I'm like, it was okay to cry. It's always okay to cry, obviously. But in that moment, there was so much leading up to it, and my feelings were 1000% valid. I'm hard on myself sometimes, so being able to give yourself grace, I always preach to other people, but I need to take my own advice because there was, we did everything we could to go that route. And like I said, I was flexible with the plan. So feeling those emotions, I think, was needed in that moment to just know, hey, live in it, it's okay. And she walked me through everything. We went over consent, we signed it, and I kind of lived in that for a second. Travis was right there with me the entire time, telling me how strong I was. I'm gonna get emotional talking about it again, but that's why I had to wait a few weeks to even film this, to be able to not be as emotional when talking about it. But again, we kind of rushed to get us to the C-section room. Travis had to wait out while they set everything up, and then he was able to be in there with me throughout the actual procedure, which is really great. Held my hand the whole time, and baby boy was delivered and healthy. And that's, in that moment, like once you hear your baby cry, I'm sure a lot of moms can relate to this, and dads and parents in general can relate to this. Once you hear your baby cry, none of that happened before that moment matters, honestly. Like, I heard his cry, and it's like I instantly, the past 48 hours, none of it mattered because he was here, he was healthy, he was breathing, and we were just so happy about that. And they had him over to the right of us for a little bit to be able to make sure he was stable, and then they brought him over to do skin to skin. I think Travis actually got to hold him first because Travis got up to go check on him, so I think they handed him to Travis quickly first, and then he brought him over to me and put him on my chest. And there's nothing like that moment when you meet your child. You've carried this baby for 10 months and you're finally meeting them, and it's just, there's no feeling like that. I really can't describe it, honestly, because it was just, there were so many emotions with it in the best way. And we were just so happy to finally meet our son, little Chance. I don't know if I even said his name this whole video, but his name is Chance. And they kept him on my chest that whole time. We did like the hour of skin to skin. A lot of my family members had been there too, and Travis's family. So we did let them come back because they were worried. They didn't know what happened. They didn't know I ended up going to get a C-section at the last minute. They weren't updated with anything because we were both in the procedure. So we brought them back so they could meet Chance too, because it was getting late, and then that was it. And we ended up getting shifted over to their recovery area and went from there. That's basically how everything went down. So no, my birth plan didn't go exactly as I thought it would in my head, but I think that's why, again, I know I said it before, it was so important for me to keep it very loose because I'm a very type A person. I like for things to go exactly the way that I've planned them. So I think I knew if it wasn't exactly what I planned, I would not be as calm as I could be, and that wasn't going to be good. Adding extra stress wasn't going to be good for myself or the baby. So if there's something I could recommend for anyone out there, if you're not sure, I would definitely have an idea of what you're looking for, but just be flexible is what I would say, because sometimes things won't go your way, and that doesn't mean it's bad at all, but if the outcome is you and your baby or babies are all healthy, I think that's what's most important in my opinion. But obviously your labor and delivery may not be the exact same as someone else, and I know everyone hears different stories and horror stories, and I don't even think my story is a bad story. It's just something different. It's different than what I expected, so that's why I think it could be helpful for anyone who goes through something similar to what I went through, because this is what I experienced, and I'm telling you right now, everything was great still in the end. I'm great. I healed really well from my C-section too. I've had a couple people ask me or be shocked that I was moving around so well, and I didn't know what recovery for C-section would look like because I didn't do a lot of research on it, because that wasn't necessarily what I thought my birth would be. But everything turned out really well. My scars very minimal. My OB, like I said, amazing. I have nothing but great things to say about the whole team that we worked with. Everything was great. So be flexible, and just know that in the end of it all, getting your healthy baby and you being healthy is the most important. So sending love your way if you're going through labor and delivery anytime soon, or if you're planning for kids, sending baby dust your way, whatever it is. But that was my process basically through it, so it's nice to be able to talk back through it. You guys can let me know if you have other questions that I can answer. I will try to answer those as best as I can. But thanks for walking through my labor and delivery process with me. Again, wishing you all nothing but the best. Thanks for watching my video. Bye.